Drug addiction is a death sentence. Who gives young kids their first drug? While I was tunnelling into banks stealing millions, the drug stole me. There was a price to pay, and I paid it. But so did the man who gave me my first pill. I am Stephen Smith, and this is my story, Addict.
Gotta let you know, gotta let you go, but I'll be back for you, but I'll be back for you.
In 1957, age 14, I was caught stealing. To avoid the scandal of a son in prison, my father bribed the magistrate to send me for psychiatric treatment to an asylum, where I was locked inside with seriously deranged adults. I wasn't depressed, just a kid caught stealing. Late one evening, after all the other staff were off duty, a Dr. Unwin dressed in a pale blue suit and bright yellow tie called for me. Smiling, he led me down the long, quiet corridor and locked us inside a small room, which looked like an operating theatre. There was only a high massage couch in the middle, and laying me down, he gave me an injection. Now light-headed, floating, I felt the doctor unzipping my trousers. "You'll like this," he said, giving me oral sex. I became aroused and had my first ever orgasm, which terrified me. But there was worse, far worse to come. A few days later, he took me to a central London pub, where in a quiet corner, handing me a little yellow pill, came those fateful words: "This pill will make you feel good." That tablet, dexedrine, a potent amphetamine drug, was the first of 500,000 pills I was to swallow over the next 20 years.
It's a mad, mad, happy, sad, sad, mad world that we live in. It's a mad, mad, happy, sad, sad,
Soon I was bursting with uncontrollable excitement, running all over the pub, talking to strangers as if I'd known them all my life. My head was a volcano exploding with happiness. Never had I felt this good before, so uncontrollably good. I ran out the pub into the street where the flashing neon signs seemed to get brighter, as if they were just lit for me. Without a fear in the world, everything looked so good.
No more worrying about having to work. Don't need no dollar anyway. Yeah!
Next day I woke naked in a huge bed, vaguely remembering getting into a taxi the night before. I lay motionless, feeling sad for no reason, wondering where yesterday's magical happiness had gone. Why did I feel so fed up? I just felt totally dejected. Never before had I experienced such isolation and despair as that morning, when from nowhere Dr. Unwin jumped out with another magical yellow pill. At first nothing, just the continuing doom and gloom. Then suddenly the happiness light switch inside my head switched on again. The room came alive. The ceiling was one massive mirror with huge paintings of naked boys on every wall. Constant explosions of happiness erupted, making me even happier than the night before.
In and out and in and out.
Like a rocket, I flew out of bed. And later that afternoon we were rowing on the Serpentine Lake. My head spun with excitement as the doctor took the oars and our boat floated through the water like a magical swan. Gliding past the ducks and under the bridges, we looked up at people's smiling faces, dropping happiness down to us. Suddenly it started, slowly at first. Out of nowhere, an invisible cloud crept over me and I began to feel low. Hoping it would pass, I thought, how can I feel low when a moment ago I was so deliriously happy? After all, I'm still in the same boat on the same lake, but the sadness stayed, like I was falling down a deep hole. Everything started to look different now, with the people on the bridges sneering at us. I wanted to get off that stupid boat. I begged for another yellow pill, but the doctor refused, taking me back to the asylum where I was given a knockout sedative. A month later, to avoid an almighty scandal, the authorities released me. Now I was a lunatic teenager fueled by little yellow pills, and all I wanted was action, and ran away from my parents' home back to the flashing neon lights. On cloud 9 I met Gentleman George, the legendary jewel thief, and as his apprentice I was now stealing diamonds instead of handbags. My first adventure was the film star Sophie Loren jewel robbery. Drugs now controlled my entire life, robbing me of my teenage years, and by the age of 20 I was entangled in London's organised crime. Robbery financed big houses and 10 years of millionaire drugged insanity. From suitcases of cash, I lived a pop star life, but with my own private hit song. Drugs, 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 and more drugs. At first, the madness had an innocence about it, with me hallucinating hearing God instructing me to feed the poor. I ran around Euston railway station giving away bundles of £5 notes to delighted down and outs. Experimenting to make the whole world a happier place, my next lunacy was trying to switch the milk delivery with amphetamine-laced milk. Sadly, it all went wrong, and the neighbours went to work on the usual pouring conflict.
There's a man over there acting crazy, might just have a gun.
Nobody suffered but me, fast becoming a robot machine fueled by little yellow pills. On amphetamine await for days, one robbery blended into the next, as I hid thousands of pounds in cash all over London, only to forget where I'd hid it. Now taking up to 100 tablets a day, I would lock myself in my study as my wife and children went about normal life. Inevitably divorce came and I moved out. Chaos followed, a robbery in Paris where drugged I refused to split the cash and now had little legs, a psychotic gangster looking for me. Hiding in rooms in a poor part of London, I was at the gates of hell waiting for the devil to open the door. Totally mad, I held imaginary conversations with empty chairs, believing they were real people. In that building infested with rats, I lived like a wild animal, not washing or changing my clothes for over a year, until one day I set fire to the entire building and found myself destitute on the streets. Those 5 years in shop doorways blended into each other, with periods in detox units or police cells. At first I shoplifted to fund my drug addiction, but soon slipped further down, drinking meths with the winos. Nothing mattered anymore except the next fix to oblivion. With all hope gone, a German student stopped and spoke with me. Before leaving, she smiled, giving me her address in Munich. A rainbow of hope lit up. Somebody knew my name, and miraculously I got admitted to a rehabilitation unit where I wrote to her. She wrote back, inviting me over for Christmas. Here I was, a tramp, a street vagrant who slept rough for 5 years, now living in a rehab with a part-time job sweeping a factory floor to buy my air ticket to visit Honey Laurie. I was in love and had the happiest 7 days of my life in the Bavarian Alps with Honey Laurie. The fairy tale perhaps will continue, with Honey Laurie agreeing to come and live in England very soon. Back in London, my life and my skull exploded with a baseball bat raining down on my head. Pain, blood, flashes of light, then darkness as those gangsters from Paris left me for dead. Regaining consciousness, I was paralysed down one side of my face. My vision was blurred, but I was so much in love and had to see Honey Law before I died. With no money, I sneaked on and off a sea ferry, and from Ostend hid in the toilets of trains to reach Munich and Hannelore. That day I had a 12-hour microscopic operation putting a plate in my skull to bring it back together. A month later, after being discharged, Hannelore and I married. I stayed drug-free for the first time in my entire life, and 2 years later we returned to England. We found some of the hidden cash and bought a beautiful house where our 2 sons were born. I had now joined the human race and walked about with a permanent grin all day. I washed the car and proudly mowed, seeded and watered my lawn to look like a bowling green. Years passed, and with me driving the kids daily to kindergarten, I had peace and was happy for the first time in my entire life. Life is a game of snakes and ladders. Away from crime, off drink and drugs for many years, with a beautiful wife and 2 sons, I landed on the longest snake ever. By pure chance, on a day out with the family at the end of Brighton Pier, I bumped into Billy, the smash and grab gangster I'd worked with in my teens. We exchanged numbers and did one last big cry. After that magical period of normality, the suitcases of cash in the loft again brought back the old paranoia big time. I stopped taking the boys to kindergarten, and my precious lawn was soon overgrown with weeds. A month after the robbery, what was I doing? Petrified the police would call, I was burning the stolen cash. Then the worst nightmare happened. After so many years, I started drinking alcoholically all over again. My revenge mode soon returned with vengeance. It was 1987, I was 44 years old, I'd waited over 30 years for this day, and now, after months of surveillance outside a luxury block of flats by Hyde Park, the time had come. Here lived a very old man. I knew this man, and he knew me. Inside I rang his bell. "Who is it?" "It's the porter, there's a gas leak," I replied. My heart lit with joy as I heard the key turning and the door began to open. I pushed the old man backwards. Tying him up, I taped his mouth, dragging him into the lounge. Unable to speak, he stared at me as I unpacked my bag. 1 gun, 1 bottle of Dexedrine tablets and several bottles of brandy. Staring at him, I spoke. "Just speak quietly or you'll die. Scream and I'll blow your fucking brains out." The old man, crying, just nodded back. Leaving him still tied up, I removed the tape from his mouth. Whispering, he spoke. "Who are you? Do you want money?" I smiled, taking a swig of brandy. "Would you like to suck my cock? You like sucking cocks, don't you, Dr. Unwin?" Terror struck his face as he realised I was the boy he'd molested 30 years ago. That innocent teenager had grown up and was back with a loaded gun. No waiting for police to press historical charges, no stretch-out court cases with pleas of memory loss. His trial had begun. "Are you going to shoot me?" he sobbed. "Not yet. I want you to die happy," I replied, forcing him to swallow several Dexedrine pills. I took out a photo of me age 14 screaming, "Why did you suck my cock?" I wanted to kill him there and then, but the terrified look on his face was so good I wanted it to last forever. Besides, it was rowing time. Petrified of being shot, Unwin quietly left with me in a taxi, which took us back to the same Serpentine Lake he'd taken me to all those years ago, the day after he'd given me my first ever amphetamine pill. Rowing that fragile old pervert round the lake, his trial continued as I screamed, "I had nightmares of you unzipping my trousers." I was about to pass sentence. Getting more drunk, I ranted on and on. "Why did you do it?" No reply. "Why did you do it?" Suddenly the pervert started smiling. "Why?" I screamed. I'll never forget his face as he replied, "You were beautiful and I had to have you." It was time for him to die, and he knew it. Did I kill him? Only God and I know what I did that day. I was just an innocent 14-year-old kid when he introduced me to the world of drugs. That pervert abused me and, like so many others, committed crimes with more serious consequences than any robbery. They're not stealing gold bullion, they're stealing innocent lives. Did Unwin deserve to die? Ask any kid who's been molested and they'll say yes. Is Unwin's body at the bottom of the Serpentine? You'll have to drain the lake to find out. I drank alcoholically from one disaster to the next for several more years, but by the grace of God stopped in January 1995. One day at a time, I've never picked up since. The next 20 years were the worst, the hardest, and by far the most unimaginable of my entire life. If I'd have known what was about to take place, I would have killed myself there and then. Now an old man, philosophical about it all, I realise the Addict story was meant to be a lesson on what not to do and what to do when the shit hits the fan. Thank you for listening.
Gotta let you know, gotta let you go, but I'll be back for you, but I'll be back for you. Gotta let you know, gotta let you go, but I'll be back for you, but I'll be back for you. Squats down in a park, lost to the dark. He doesn't know where his day has gone. The choice of others to blend as one. He's a master of survival. He believes in the Bible, shouting, "Lost my life to a habit. Lost my life to a habit. Lost my life to a habit."